Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to the webinar regarding orchestrating the various departments in your company to make your organization a stronger adversary in a delay claim. My name is Steve Berkowitz. I'm the president of Berkowitz and Associates. We are a construction law firm. We deal exclusively in construction issues representing parties to construction projects. We work with the Moment Group. The Moment Group counsels parties in construction projects pertaining to various issues, specifically delay and similar scheduling issues. Today is the third part in a five-part series pertaining to the subject I mentioned, orchestrating your departments of your company's forces in order to make your organization a stronger adversary in a delay claim. In a delay claim, the landscape is always the same. The contractor wants more money for the delay, the owner wants to pay less money for a delay. So, how are we going to make a determination of how much money should exchange hands, if any? That determination is made hopefully during negotiations. While litigation and the courts are always one avenue, negotiations are the vehicle by which contractors receive money for delays in 99% of the circumstances. So, what we're here today to do is to determine ways to make your company a stronger adversary in these negotiations. When our first program, we spoke about the way management and in-house contract administration, accounting, field personnel, and scheduling can all work together to establish your firm's entitlement to the compensation that you're looking for. We talked about being the stronger adversary, and it's really common sense here, where if you compare this or analogize this to a bar fight, in that situation, you want to be the biggest guy in the bar. Well, this isn't a fight, this is a negotiation, but the same principles apply in that you want to be the strongest, the negotiator with the strongest position. And we talked about how do we get to that position. Last webinar last month, we spoke about documents. We said documents, documents, documents. Documents change the entire equation. And you can see that in almost every aspect of a negotiation. Documents can differentiate one party from another, from one position to another position. And we talked about that in webinar number 2. Today we're going to talk about the critical path method. And that's really just another way in which you're going to portray your documents. The critical path is the most accepted way of determining what the proper time and compensation should be for a delay. Let's first talk about what do we mean by critical path. Well, the simplest definition is that the critical path is the longest sequence of activities on a project plan which must be completed in time for the project to be completed by the due date. The activities on a path cannot be started until the previous activity is completed. That's the way an activity gets to be on the critical path. It has to be important, and it has to be a activity that cannot be started until the previous activity is completed. So if a activity on the critical path is delayed one day, the entire project is delayed one day, unless that time can be made up. Quite often, in order for time to be made up, it's going to cost money. we can revert back to the old saying, time is money. And nowhere else is it more true than in a construction project. Now, the critical path method is a method that's not only particular to construction projects. They're used for aerospace projects, software development projects, research projects. It's a fairly common scheme, and it makes logical sense. Again, the theory, the theme behind these webinars is to make your your company the stronger adversary, to establish your right to entitlement. If you have a understanding of not only the importance of documents, but the way you can portray documents to show that you have an entitlement that's provable using the critical path method, you're going to be a much stronger adversary in the negotiations. So, we know what the critical path method is. Now, the purpose of this webinar is not to teach you to create a critical path schedule. It's really to give you the tools that you need to speak intelligently and about the critical path and what you can show and how you're going to show that you have entitlement based on the critical path method. So, as with other issues in a construction project, and as we discussed at length in webinar number 2, documentation is extremely important. And the way that you make yourself a stronger adversary and prove that you're entitled to what you're looking for is by being able to produce the right documentation. Now, the documentation we're talking about, as we discussed further in webinar number 2, contemporaneous documentation is the most persuasive documentation, not only in a court of law, but also when you're making a presentation to another party in a construction contract. If you can pull up documents not that were just created the day before your meeting, but documents that were made at the time the event was occurring, those documents have an automatic air of authenticity. So, in creating the critical path, we're going to be using schedules, which are going to be contemporaneously created documents. We have your baseline schedule that was created before we ran into any issues, and updates, which are created periodically, hopefully, during the construction process. Daily reports and job logs. Again, contemporaneous document. We can't be creating daily reports at the end of the project or neglecting to create daily reports and then try to make it up later on in the project, because they're going to lose their air of authenticity. Correspondences, another contemporaneous document. Submittals, that's going to allow you to show when you submitted, what you submitted, and one very common delay is sometimes the design professional doesn't return your submittals or approve your submittals in time. If you have your submittals and you can show when they were submitted, they're contemporaneous documents. Requests for information, also dated documents. Interviews. Your people and your subcontractors could be a very important source of information, particularly when you're determining which activities are on the critical path. If you can make notes from the interviews and those notes can be dated, those can be contemporaneous documents. Again, you're building your case and you're allowing the other side to see that you have the necessary documents to prevail on the point that you're trying to make. Change order requests show what you asked for and when you asked for it. Meeting minutes, I don't even think we need to talk about that. We all know how important those can be. And it's not just important to keep your meeting minutes, it is extremely important to review them at the time that they are published. There's two reasons behind this. First, it allows you to maintain that all important status as a contemporaneous document. But second, it allows the other side to respond if you want additional information added to the meeting minutes, or perhaps if you want to correct something in the meeting minutes. Usually in the specifications, there's going to be a time frame set forth for responding to meeting minutes, and you should adhere to that time frame, and you should save any corrections. And it's important that you review the meeting minutes on a timely manner, and that you respond accordingly. Now, again, we're not going to teach you to make a critical path method schedule, but what we want to do is we want you to be conversant in the critical path method so that you can display that you have retained the documents and you are prepared to turn them over to your expert if need be, and your expert can create the critical path if he needs to, either in negotiations or in court if you have to go there. So, as we discussed, identifying the activities that are on the critical path, they're activities that if they're delayed, the entire project is delayed, and they're activities that one cannot start until the other one is completed. An understanding of this will allow you not only to give the necessary information to your scheduler, but it will also allow you to show the other side that you are ready to prove your entitlement under a delay situation. Determining the sequence of activities, that again is going to require that you interview people in the field and that you have a full understanding of how the project is going to unfold. Connecting or creating a network of activities. It's related to the sequence of activities, but it's very important that the sequence makes sense. Entering the completion time for every activity listed in step one. Well, that's how you've got to make sure that at the beginning of the project, your critical path is going to equal the due date of your contract. As items on the critical path are delayed, the due date of the contract is going to be delayed. You've got one or two choices. You can either have a later due date, or you can accelerate the activities that are on the critical path. Either way, it could cost money, and it can be grounds for further negotiations. And we talked about identify the critical path or the longest possible path to complete activities, and the critical path is something that's a dynamic activity, and it must be updated periodically and tracked closely so that you can show that you have the contemporaneous documents necessary to prove your entitlement. Now, when something on the critical path is changed, such as a change order is issued, the design is changed, one important contemporaneous document is a time impact analysis, often referred to as a TIA. Sometimes it's required by the specification. I've read specifications where they say if there is a additional component of this change order requiring an extension of time, you have to submit a time impact analysis. We talked previously during the documentation webinar about the two components to a change order. There's the price, and there's also the time. The change order is going to be a contemporaneous document, meaning that at the time you submitted the change order, this is what you thought the price is going to be. This is what you thought the time impact is going to be. If you have to produce a time impact analysis, you're best off doing it, because that can be failure to do something required by the specification can be a real hindrance to your negotiations. And it's even worse when you have to go into court and the judge says, well, here the specifications require you submit a time impact analysis. I'd like to see what you thought the time impact due to this change of activity was going to take. And you say, well, I didn't do that, Judge. And the problem is that there is a good reason for that requirement in the specification. And where there's a good reason, just take it from me, where there's a good reason for something in the specification, it's pretty hard to explain to a fact finder or a judge why you didn't do it. If right now that they're looking at you saying, where is it? And this is why we need it. Obviously, the time impact analysis can be prospective, looking forward, or retrospective, looking back. Under our theme of contemporaneous documents and the value of contemporaneous documents, the prospective time impact analysis is the more important document. So you want to be able to have such an item at your fingertips when it's necessary. Now, let's look at applicable situations where you can use a time impact analysis. First is under a late notice to proceed. I think in webinar 5, we're going to be looking at a case study, and I'll give you a little foreshadowing that the issue is going to be a late notice to proceed and what that does to the rest of the construction project. Well, a time impact analysis can be very valuable here. Obviously, it works best in conjunction with a critical path schedule so that you can see exactly what the impact of the late notice to proceed is going to do to every single activity on your critical path, and you'll be able to prove your entitlement. Other situations where a time impact analysis is applicable would be undisclosed conditions as opposed to unknown site conditions. An undisclosed condition is a condition that could have been known but was not disclosed in your specifications. It's something you should have been aware of, but I'm not taking a shot at the designers, but their failure to disclose that condition caused an impact on the critical path. A time delay analysis will allow you to show what that impact could or should be. Unknown site conditions, that's something that the designer did not know, but that you discovered during the construction. That's a activity that a time impact analysis will help you with. Request for proposals, that's a request for a change by the owner, and as we discussed, a change order contains two components, not just the change in cost, but also the additional time necessary to complete that change order. The time impact analysis will allow you to show what you're entitled to. A timely submitted time impact analysis can be used as a contemporaneous document in the future where you can show you let everybody know, including the owner and the designers and the engineers, what the effect of this request for proposal, what this change order is going to, what impact it's going to have on the entire critical path. And it's going to make you in a very strong position when you're asking for your compensation or your entitlement in the project. field orders and adverse weather conditions. Those are also events that are going to require a time impact analysis so that you can show what this is doing to the critical path of the project and the project overall. If it's necessary to accelerate your work, you'll be able to show how much you need to accelerate the work, but also, and more importantly, you're going to be able to show that you let all of the parties know the impact of this changed activity or this event on the project, and you gave all the parties in the construction project ample time to mitigate their damages, which is a very important concept that we're often going to talk about when you're in a court of law or when you're in litigation. So that concludes our webinar on the critical path method and time impact analysis. My name again is Steve Berkowitz. The firm is Berkowitz and Associates. The email contact information is on the bottom of the slides. And if anybody has any questions, they should feel free to type them into the chat box on the side of your screen. If I don't see any questions at this time, I would like to thank you for tuning into this webinar, and we'll be talking next month about evaluating your claim so that you have an idea of what you're entitled to. Again, Steve Berkowitz, thank you very much for your time.